12 minutes past 9 on this Friday morning. Quinny, good morning to you.
Good morning.
You were
sorry.
in a rush to get in.
Roger's put me to sleep there at the end, you know, talking rubbish.
Well, he nailed it when he was saying that Nathan was like a latte, sort of skinny latte.
No, he just got confused.
No, he
didn't.
meant to
say
he was
Adrian
right
Barry.
first time around. We'd Warren Gatland in with us during the week, and I'm sure people are aware of this at this point, and was chatting about the suspicion that he had that, not based on any evidence, he said himself at the time, that just a suspicion, a hunch that one of his players might have been doping. We've been in touch with the UK Anti-Doping Agency, who've told us that they're curtailed in their ability to comment during a pre-general election period as a state-connected body, and they'll not be offering any comment on what Warren Gatland told off the ball. That's their stance on it this week. You'd some interesting stuff to say, Quinny, including that. I don't know if you've any thoughts on that one way or the other.
Yeah, it's difficult, I think. Obviously, if you're coaching any team at any level and you know, that situation arises, what do you do? Do you not pick the player based on a suspicion? Do you say it to somebody else? Did he alert somebody else? So yeah, it was a really kind of strange one. Obviously, you can't name the player because then you're in.
It just seemed to be like a hunch that he had, like almost that he would have admitted it.
Look, I've a hunch of some players in rugby that
have you? Yeah.
Possibly
now.
Yeah. So hunches.
Is it the hunch that everybody else has based on stuff, or is there something deeper?
No, I think.
Let's be very careful here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you get me into trouble. I think you can always have hunches on certain people when the way they perform or the way they've. Their condition has changed or their body shape has changed and stuff like that. And I probably have had a couple of debates, not in a calm manner with Paul Kimmage in the last few years, probably over and back on a couple of articles we both did. And Paul has obviously done brilliant work in cycling to expose people who've cheated in the game and you know, Lance Armstrong, that most high profile and stuff, and we're all against drugs in sport, and so I think I wouldn't say I've changed my mindset, but like probably my eyes have been opened a little bit more in recent years. That
would that include players close to home, or?
Yeah, it would and it wouldn't. I think I just realise more that the temptation is far greater now because of the financial reward. And I'm not saying that my generation was squeaky clean. All I ever said in the pieces over and back with Paul was that I hadn't seen it. And I can't say I have seen it if I haven't. I can only be honest to myself whether you believe me or not. And what I had seen was a group of players who worked incredibly hard and made small marginal gains each season. And when I say marginal gain, I mean your bench might have been 130 when you do the bench press test, and maybe after 12 months you might be 135, and that's a massive win. And we used to have really competitive slagging matches. Paul O'Connell was behind most of them, particularly with me, because if he was lifting more on the bench than me, and he was good at it. That, you know, a bit of banter around that, or deadlifts or squat jumps and all that kind of stuff. So, and you know, I'd seen people just train their socks off and put the effort and time in and make those marginal gains. Is
it something that you see increasing? Like, is that the?
I think the temptation is definitely increasing, and like I said, I haven't completely changed my mindset. What I tried to say at the time was I hadn't seen it. I'm sure it's there, and I'm sure that we're like the system here probably does need to probably, and there's been debates about this in recent times about maybe the school system and the temptation for younger players that there needs to be more stringent testing. But the IRFU actually have invested money outside of Sport Ireland to get more tests done. So the testing has increased over the years, the random testing, and I think I did the piece on South Africa before the World Cup. And it wasn't based on just a picture or a picture. I think it was based on maybe the evidence that's there if you Google it, that there's a lot of South African rugby players. And this is like any sort of scandal or any sort of situation. It's very unfair on the clean athletes in South Africa and all the clean rugby players and all the guys who get those marginal gains and do the things right. it's very unfair, and they feel aggrieved sometimes by it.
But that's why they should be outraged by it.
They are,
and
but in fairness to South African, the testing is very, very stringent, and they do test in schools, and they do test a lot more than here. So maybe more testing needs to happen here, but I think there is a culture, and it's, there's a lot of South African guys who've tested positive for drugs, and that unfortunately tarnishes other people and the sport in general there. And so that it's a very kind of I can understand why people sometimes get angry that everybody will just jump on a kind of one particular argument and say, oh, there's loads of drugs in rugby, the clean ones. So I was a clean athlete, so that's where I kind of come defending the sport. But in recent years, I just think probably the more I've gone out of the game, I kind of go, the temptation is getting bigger, the financial reward, the opportunities for people in the sport, and the toll of the sport, really, So it's a very, very complex, dangerous situation that probably, needs to probably get better everywhere and have that zero tolerance policy around it. But there's a lot of good stuff that goes on, and a lot of changes I'd seen through the start of my career to the end of my career, where there was more testing, there was random testing, there was out of season testing, there was, so for Warren Gatland to say that, we probably all can have our suspicions, and I suppose every rugby player can go look at someone and say, well, that person's gone a lot bigger or gone a lot fitter or playing incredibly well. So it's not always about anabolic steroids who put on muscle. It could be
slimming down,
anaerobic improvements. So in other words, like the EPO that you use in cycling, where is it for your oxygen intake, and that you can cycle faster and longer, and so maybe there's that's probably not as visual as the if you're looking at physical sides and say, well, these are kind of bodybuilder type bodies on rugby players.
It's a topic we're definitely going to go back to. It's great that he would open up that Pandora's box again and give us an opportunity to chat about it, so we will come back to it again. I know you're limited at time. The two, I suppose, main provinces that we would look at in terms of their capacity to win the Heineken Cup this season are Munster and Leinster, who are presumably separately going to easily dispatch their opponents this weekend. What's jumping out?
Well, I think you would imagine the way Leinster played against Connacht last week, an incredibly positive result. Not just winning in Galway and winning in the sports ground has been, a very tough place for any team to go, given the changes and the improvements Andy Friend and Connacht have made in his time there. But I think it was just a manner and the ruthlessness, the accuracy, the energy, and you're doing it with lots of young players and a lot of your frontliners missing, and you take so much positivity as a group and you kind of grow so much. So, they've kind of, it was a bit of a kind of a bright moment for them last Friday night, in the sense that, the future is bright, and here we are churning out more young players like Ronan Kelleher, Will Connors, Jimmy O'Brien, Hugo Keenan, these guys who are, probably have big futures in front of them with Leinster and Ireland, and they're probably the least active in the transfer market, if you like, at the end of each season now, because they're producing young players coming through who are exciting young players. Now, Europe is a different kettle of fish than Pro 14. It's just, there's no doubt about that. And Ospreys will find that out Munster will find out.
They're coming in at a dismal level.
And Leinster Benetton will be, there'll be no easy kind of touch.
What's a good, because there's no real point in getting into the
ins and outs in the teams.
What's a good outcome for Munster this season?
A good outcome for Munster is this season. Well, some seasons you look at it and you say, well, they've got to get out of the quarterfinals. Anything less is not good enough, or maybe not even get to a semi-final. And they've done that in the last couple of seasons and punched above their weight at times. Edinburgh probably should have beaten them in that quarter-final last year. They've come up short because of probably squad depth and top quality at the last kind of 3 or 4. And when you get to that level, just more depth and more quality. but they've done remarkably well, to be fair. This year, I think getting to a quarter-final is a big achievement, given Racing and Saracens are there. And so, you know, it is the pool of death. I think for Munster, and they've got to make sure that they win their home games. I think if you win your home games, you're giving yourself a great shot. They're away against Ospreys, so you just think it's a must-win game. It's non-negotiable if they want to get out of this group. And that will kind of kickstart their campaign. Then they've got Racing at home next week, and, you know, again, they're getting Racing. Who knows with the competition? Who's in good shape or who's in bad shape?
Like given that Saracens are going to be whatever they're going to be now in this.
And they're you know, so it's a pool of death, and I think
it's not really the pool of death anymore, though, is it? If Saracens are
well, you know, I'm not buying into this scenario of Saracens. I think nothing's really changed in a huge sense from that. They're going to have their English players are going to be very slow to come back into their system anyway. They're limited to the number of games they can play. They've already played 4 warm-up games, 6 or 7 at a World Cup, so a number of them have 7 or 8, 10 games played. So I think 30 is their limit with internationals and clubs. So Mark McCall, can he roll them out for 9 rounds of Europe right to the final? That's up in 19, 20 games, and then they have, you know, Gallagher Premiership and stuff. So it's kind of mixing and managing. But I think what they've done in Saracens,
they've spent well.
Well, the depth of the squad and the quality of even some of the younger players that are less known. There's a lot of talented players there, and they proved that last week by beating Gloucester. You know, I think I listened to him during the week saying that, you know, if we to go put this team out for Europe, I'd be very happy that they could do a job. Obviously, when you Farrells and Vunipola and Otojes and these guys come back into a team, they're a different beast altogether. But it'll be interesting to see how that happens. And, you know, for the French teams, for Racing, I had a chat with Mike Prendergast, and, you know, they had a number 12, 13 away at the World Cup as well. So it's a lot of the teams, and that's probably the key this weekend, is who can get that little bit of early momentum and get a good positive result and get up and running.
You in Monday?
I am.
Look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm doing Bath Ulster tomorrow, so and that's a really interesting one.
The only place to catch Bath Ulster, Quinny.
You and me both, Quinny. You and me both.
But I think it's interesting that Ulster have got to do a similar situation. I think they've Quins and Claremont in their group, and if they've aspirations of getting out of the group, they've got to get an away win, and probably tomorrow is the best time to do that, where Bath are probably, even though they had a very good win against Northampton last week, they've only 4 rounds of Gallagher Premiership played in England.
They haven't exactly set the world alight, Bath.
Yeah, Ulster were poor last week down. They were at moments down in Thomond Park, but they've got to be a lot better, and it's an opportunity for them. They either win there, they win in Quins, and then they win their home games. But I think for any of the Irish provinces, it's a minimum requirement. Well, particularly for Ulster, Munster, Leinster, with respect to Connacht, they haven't been in the competition year in, year out. But I'm looking forward to that one on Sunday against Montpellier.
Should be a good one.
They were really poor against Leinster last week, Connacht, but injury problems, Quinn Rue, Thornbury, Ultan Delan missing. I think Ultan Delan is going to be back, and the sports ground will be rocking on Sunday against Montpellier.
Very good, Quinny. Chat Monday.
Pleasure.
Enjoy the weekend.